The Macedonians were an ancient tribe that lived on the alluvial plain around the rivers Halikarmon and Lower Axios in the northeastern part of the Greek peninsula. Essentially an ancient Greek people, they gradually expanded from their homeland along the Halikarmon Valley on the northern edge of the Greek world, absorbing or driving out neighboring tribes, primarily Thracian and Illyrian. Although composed of various clans, the Kingdom of Macedon, established around the 8th century BC, is mostly associated with the Argead dynasty, and the tribe named after it. Traditionally ruled by independent families, the Macedonians seem to have accepted Argead rule by the time of King Alexander I. Under King Philip II, they are credited with numerous military innovations, which enlarged their territory and increased their control over other areas, leading to the exploits of Alexander the Great, the establishment of several realms from the Diadochi, and the inauguration of the Hellenistic civilization. Early history. The expansion of the Macedonian kingdom has been described as a three-stage process. As a frontier kingdom on the border of the Greek world with barbarian Europe, the Macedonians first subjugated their immediate northern neighbors, various Illyrian and Thracian tribes, before turning against the states of southern and central Greece. Macedonia then led a pan-Hellenic military force against their primary objective, the conquest of Persia, which they achieved with remarkable ease. Prehistoric homeland. In Greek mythology, Macedon is the eponymous hero of Macedonia and is mentioned in Hesiod's catalogue of women. The first historical attestation of the Macedonians occurs in the works of Herodotus during the mid-5th century BC. The Macedonians are absent in Homer's catalogue of ships. The term Macedonia itself appears late. The Iliad states that upon leaving Olympus, Hera journeyed via Pieria and Emathia before reaching Athos. This is reiterated by Strabo in his geography. Nevertheless, archaeological evidence indicates that Mycenaean contact with or penetration into the Macedonian interior possibly started from the early 14th century BC. In his A History of Macedonia, Nicholas G. L. Hammond reconstructed the earliest phases of Macedonian history based on his interpretation of later literary accounts and archaeological excavations in the region of Macedonia. According to Hammond, the Macedonians are missing from early Macedonian historical accounts because they had been living in the Orestian highlands since before the Dark Ages, possibly having originated from the same population pool that produced other Greek peoples. The Macedonian tribe subsequently moved down from Orestis in the upper Halikarmon to the Pierian highlands in the lower Halikarmon because of pressure from the Oreste, a related tribe who had migrated to Orestis from Pelagonia. In their new Pierian home north of Olympus, the Macedonian tribes mingled with the Dorians to be. This might account for traditions which placed the eponymous founder, Macedon, round Pieria and Olympus. Some traditions placed the Dorian homeland in the Pindus mountain range in western Thessaly, whilst Herodotus pushed this further north to the Macedonian Pindus and work called as an ethnos, M alpha kappa epsilon delta nu omicron nu. A different, southern homeland theory also exists in traditional historiography. Arnold Joseph Toynbee said that the Macedons migrated north to Macedonia from central Greece, placing the Dorian homeland in Thyatus and citing the traditions of fraternity between Macedon and Magnus, Temenids and Argeads. The Macedonian expansion is said to have been led by the ruling Temenid dynasty, known as Argeads, or Argives. Herodotus said that Perdiccas, the dynasty's founder, was descended from the Heraclid Temenus. He left Argos with his two older brothers Aeropus and Gaeanus, and travelled via Illyria to Libya, a city in Upper Macedonia which certain scholars have tried to connect with the villages Alabi or Velvidos. Here, the brothers served as shepherds for a local ruler. After a vision, the brothers fled to another region in Macedonia near the Midas Gardens by the foot of Mount Bermion. and then set about subjugating the rest of Macedonia. Thucydides's account is similar to that of Herodotus, making it probable that the story was disseminated by the Macedonian court, i.e., it accounts for the belief the Macedonians had about the origin of their kingdom, if not an actual memory of this beginning. Later historians modified the dynastic traditions by introducing variously Caranus or Archelaus, the son of Temenus, as the founding Temenid kings, although there is no doubt that Euripides transformed Caranus to Archelaus, meaning leader of the people, in his play, Archelaus, in an attempt to please Archelaus I of Macedon. The earliest sources, Herodotus and Thucydides, called the royal family Temenidae. In later sources the term Argedi was introduced. However, Appian said that the term Argedi referred to a leading Macedonian tribe rather than the name of the ruling dynasty. The connection of the name Argedes to the royal family is uncertain. The words Arged and Argive, derived via Latin argivis from the Greek rho gamma epsilon omicron sigma, meaning of or from Argos, and is first attested in Homer, where it was also used as a collective designation for the Greeks. The most common connection to the royal family, as written by Herodotus, is with Peloponnesian Argos. Appian connects it with Orestian Argos. According to another tradition, the name was adopted after Caranus moved Macedonia's capital from Edessa to Asia, thus appropriating the name of the city for its citizens. A figure, Argias, is mentioned in the Iliad. Therefore it is possible that there may have been an even earlier tradition deriving the genealogy of the Macedonian kings from the heroes of the Trojan cycle, which was popular in neighboring Epirus. Taking Herodotus's lineage account as the most trustworthy, Appian said that after Perdiccas, 6 successive heirs ruled: Argius, Philip, Euripus, Alchates, Amyntas and Alexander. Amyntas I ruled at the time of the Persian invasion of Paeonia and when Macedon became a vassal state of the former. However, Alexander I is the first truly historic figure, based on this line of succession and an estimated average rule of 25 to 30 years. The beginnings of the Macedonian dynasty have thus been traditionally dated to 750 BC. Hammond supports the traditional view that the Temenidae did arrive from the Peloponnese and took charge of Macedonian leadership, possibly usurping rule from a native Arged dynasty with Illyrian help. However, other scholars doubt the veracity of their Peloponnesian origins. For example, Hatzopoulos takes Appian's testimony to mean that the royal lineage imposed itself onto the tribes of the Middle Heliacmon from Argos Oresticon, whilst Borza said that the Argedes were a family of notables hailing from Vergina. Expansion from the core. Both Strabo and Thucydides said that Emathia and Pieria were mostly occupied by Thracians and Bottiaeans, as well as some Illyrian and Epirote tribes. Herodotus states that the Bryges were cohabitants with the Macedonians before the latter's mass migrating to Asia Minor. If a group of ethnically definable Macedonian tribes were living in the Pierian highlands prior to their expansion, the first conquest was of the Pierian Piedmontan coastal plain, including Vergina. The tribes may have launched their expansion from a base near Mount Bermion, according to Herodotus. Thucydides describes the Macedonian expansion specifically as a process of conquest led by the Argedi, but the country along the sea, which is now called Macedonia, was first acquired and made a kingdom by Alexander I, father of Perdiccas II, and his forefathers, who were originally Temenidae from Argos. They defeated and expelled from Pieria the Pierians, and also expelled the Bottiaeans from Bottiaea. They acquired as well a narrow strip of Paeonia extending along the Axios River from the interior to Pella and the sea. Beyond the Axios they possessed the territory as far as the Strymon called Mygdonia, having driven out the Adoni. Moreover, they expelled from the district now called Eordia the Ordi. The Macedonians also made themselves rulers of certain places, namely Anthemus, Grestonia, and a large part of Macedonia proper. Thucydides' account gives a geographical overview of Macedonian possessions at the time of Alexander I's rule. To reconstruct a chronology of the expansion by Alexander I's predecessors is more difficult, but generally, 3 stages have been proposed from Thucydides' reading. The initial and most important conquest was of Pieria and the Botiae, including the locations of Pydna and Dium. The second stage consolidated rule in Pieria and Botiaea, captured Methone and Pella, and extended rule over Eordia and Almopia. According to Hammond, the third stage occurred after 550 BC, when the Macedonians gained control over Mygdonia, Adonia, Lower Paeonia, Bisaltia and Crestonia. However, the second stage might have occurred as late as 520 BC, and the third stage probably did not occur until after 479 BC, when the Macedonians capitalized on the weakened Paeonian state after the Persian withdrawal from Macedon and the rest of their mainland European territories. Whatever the case, Thucydides' account of the Macedonian state describes its accumulated territorial extent by the rule of Perdiccas II, Alexander I's son. Hammond has said that the early stages of Macedonian expansion were militaristic, subduing or expunging populations from a large and varied area. It has been hypothesized that the cause of Macedonian expansion was demographic pressure, because pastoralism and highland living could not support a very concentrated settlement density. Pastoralist tribes often searched for more arable lowlands suitable for agriculture. Ethnogenesis Scenario. Present-day scholars have highlighted several inconsistencies in the traditionalist perspective first set in place by Hammond. An alternative model of state and ethnos formation, promulgated by an alliance of regional elites, which predates the creation of the Macedonian kingdom to the 6th century BC, was proposed in 2010. According to these scholars, direct literary, archaeological, and linguistic evidence to support Hammond's contention that a distinct Macedonian ethnos had existed in the Halikarnassus Valley since the Bronze Age is lacking. Hammond's interpretation has been criticized as of conjectural reconstruction, from what appears during later, historical times. Similarly, the historicity of migration, conquest and population expulsion have also been questioned. Thucydides' account of the forced expulsion of the Pierians and Botians could have been formed on the basis of his perceived similarity of names of the Pierians and Botians living in the Strymon Valley with the names of regions in Macedonia, whereas his account of Eordian extermination was formulated because such toponymic correspondences are absent. Likewise, the Argead conquest of Macedonia may be viewed as a commonly used literary topos in classical Macedonian rhetoric. Tales of migration served to create complex genealogical connections between trans-regional ruling elites, while at the same time were used by the ruling dynasty to legitimize their rule, heroicize mythical ancestors and distance themselves from their subjects. Conflict was a historical reality in the early Macedonian kingdom, and pastoralist traditions allowed the potential for population mobility. Greek archaeologists have found that some of the passes linking the Macedonian highlands with the valley regions have been used for thousands of years. However, the archaeological evidence does not point to any significant disruptions between the Iron Age and Hellenistic periods in Macedonia. The general continuity of material culture, settlement sites, and pre-Greek onomasticon contradict the traditional, ethnic cleansing, account of early Macedonian expansion. The process of state formation in Macedonia was similar to that of its neighbors in Epirus, Illyria, Thrace and Thessaly, whereby regional elites could mobilize disparate communities for the purpose of organizing land and resources. Local notables were often based in urban-like settlements, although contemporaneous historians often did not recognize them as polis because they were not self-ruled but under the rule of a king. From the mid-6th century, there appears a series of exceptionally rich burials throughout the region, in Trebinista, Virgina, Sindos, Aegea Paraskevi, Pelaraco, Aani, Gevgelia, Amphipolis, sharing a similar burial rite and grave accompaniments, interpreted to represent the rise of a new regional ruling class sharing a common ideology, customs and religious beliefs, a common geography, mode of existence, and defensive interests might have necessitated the creation of a political confederacy among otherwise ethno-linguistically diverse communities, which led to the consolidation of a new Macedonian ethnic identity. The traditional view that Macedonia was populated by rural ethnic groups in constant conflict is slowly changing, bridging the cultural gap between southern Epirus and the North Aegean region. Hatzopoulos' studies on Macedonian institutions have lent support to the hypothesis that Macedonian state formation occurred via an integration of regional elites, which were based in city-like centers, including the Argedai at Virgina, the Paeonian, Adonian peoples in Sindos, Aknai and Pella, and the mixed Macedonian barbarian colonies in the Thermaic Gulf and western Chalkidike. The Temenidai became overall leaders of a new Macedonian state because of the diplomatic proficiency of Alexander I and the logistic centrality of Virgina itself. It has been suggested that a breakdown in traditional Balkan tribal traditions associated with adaptation of Aegean socio-political institutions created a climate of institutional flexibility in a vast, resource-rich land. Non-Argead centers increasingly became dependent allies, allowing the Argeads to gradually assert and secure their control over the lower and eastern territories of Macedonia. This control was fully consolidated by Philip II,